The rain was falling so hard, it blurred the city into a watercolor painting of gray and silver. Windshield wipers swished back and forth, barely keeping up with the sheets of water pouring down. Inside her sleek black sedan, Caroline Hayes, a woman in her early 50s with sharp features softened by a touch of weariness, sat in the back seat scrolling through her phone. Her driver inched forward through traffic, the sound of rain drumming like restless fingers on the roof. Caroline had just left a tense board meeting and was already mentally drafting a speech she'd have to give tomorrow. Her mind was on business until something caught her eye. On the sidewalk, through the rain-smeared glass, she saw him. A boy, no older than 12, stood under a flickering street lamp, his hair plastered to his head, his thin jacket soaked through. In his arms, he cradled two crying babies, their tiny faces pressed against his chest. He wasn't holding an umbrella. He wasn't calling for help. He was just standing there. And yet, every few seconds, his head would jerk slightly, his eyes scanning the street like he was afraid someone might see him. Caroline's brow furrowed. Something about the way he stood, protective but also on edge, made it impossible to look away. She leaned forward. "Pull over," she told her driver. "Ma'am, we'll block traffic. Just do it." The car eased to the curb. Caroline rolled down her window, rain splashing her sleeve. "Hey," she called. "Are you okay?" The boy looked up. His hazel eyes were striking, but there was no spark of mischief or youth in them, only exhaustion. He shook his head. "Do you need help?" she pressed. He hesitated, then said softly, "They're cold." "Get in the car," Caroline said. He froze. We're fine," he stammered, shifting the babies in his arms as they whimpered. "No," she said firmly. "You're not fine. Get in." For a moment, he looked like he might bolt into the rain, but then, reluctantly, he climbed inside, still holding the babies so tightly it was as if letting go would mean losing them forever. And that was the moment Caroline Hayes' life changed forever. Caroline Hayes was not the kind of woman who made impulsive decisions. A self-made millionaire, she'd built her empire in the world of real estate development. Every square inch of her life was planned. Her calendar, her meetings, even her morning coffee routine. She'd been widowed for 8 years. Her husband, Daniel, had been her partner in both business and life. His sudden passing left her with an empty house and too much silence to fill. She never had children. By choice, she told people. Though sometimes she wondered if she was just too afraid. Caroline was respected, even admired, but she kept her circle small. She was polite, generous with charity donations, but distant in personal matters. Luke, she would learn his name later, was about to change all of that. As the sedan pulled away from the curb, Caroline noticed how he sat on the very edge of the seat, his wet clothes dripping onto the floor, his body curled protectively around the babies. "What are their names?" she asked. "Emma and Ella," he said quietly. "They're your sisters?" He nodded. "And you're how old?" 12. The driver glanced at Caroline in the mirror, clearly wondering what on earth was happening. "Where's your mom?" Caroline asked gently. The boy's lips pressed together, and for a second she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice so soft she almost didn't hear it, he said, She died 2 weeks ago." Caroline felt a jolt in her chest. "And your father?" The boy shook his head. "Don't know where he is. He left a long time ago." The rest of the ride to the hospital was quiet except for the soft cries of the babies and the steady patter of rain on the roof. At the hospital, nurses swarmed the twins, checking their temperatures, wrapping them in warm blankets. Luke refused to let them out of his sight. A nurse offered him a sandwich. He shook his head. Not until I know they're okay. It was only after the doctor assured him that the babies were in stable condition that Luke sat down and took a bite, chewing quickly, as though the food might be taken away at any moment. Caroline watched him closely. She recognized that kind of guardedness. She had once felt it herself after Daniel's death, when every kindness from a stranger felt like a trick, something that might disappear without warning. Luke, she said, testing the name on her tongue. You and your sisters are coming home with me tonight. His eyes widened. What? Just for the night, she said. You need a warm bed. They need a warm bed. Luke looked like he wanted to protest, but exhaustion had dulled his fight. He just nodded. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Caroline's sedan pulled into her gated driveway. Her home was large but not ostentatious. Stone facade, warm lights glowing from inside, the faint smell of cedar from the old trees that lined the property. The front door opened before they reached it. Mrs. Hayes? It was Margaret, her longtime housekeeper, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a knack for knowing when something was wrong. Caroline stepped inside, motioning for Luke to follow. Margaret, this is Luke, and these are Emma and Ella. We'll need 2 cribs set up in the guest room. Tonight. Margaret's gaze swept over Luke, and something softened in her face. She simply nodded. Luke lingered in the foyer, his shoes dripping on the marble. His eyes darted to the chandelier, the sweeping staircase, the fireplace crackling in the living room. It was clear he had never stepped into a house like this before. You can set them down in here, Caroline said, leading him to the parlor where Margaret had already fetched 2 soft blankets. Luke hesitated. They're used to me holding them. Caroline crouched so her eyes were level with his. You've done a good job keeping them safe. Now let us help. Slowly, he placed the babies on the blankets, kneeling beside them like a guard unwilling to leave his post. The first days were cautious. Luke was polite but distant, speaking only when necessary. He accepted meals but always left a bit on the plate, as though saving it for later. He flinched if Margaret reached toward him too suddenly. Caroline didn't press him. Instead, she created a rhythm. Breakfast at 8, time in the garden with the twins in the morning, homework in the afternoon. She left small kindnesses in his path. A pair of dry sneakers left by the door, a set of coloring books for Emma and Ella, a warm cup of cocoa on the table when he came in from the rain. Little by little, he began to respond. One afternoon, she found him in the kitchen, helping Margaret dry dishes. They said thank you for the shoes, he mumbled without looking at her. Caroline smiled. You're welcome. A week later, Caroline walked into her study to find Luke sitting at her desk, her laptop open in front of him. Sorry, he blurted, reaching to close it. No harm done, she said. What are you looking at? He hesitated. Your company's website. Some of the listings, they're out of date. I thought maybe I could fix them? Caroline blinked. You know how to do that? Luke shrugged. I watch tutorials online. Sometimes if I'm in a library, I practice. Show me, she said. And he did. Quick, efficient, focused. Caroline found herself watching his hands, not the screen, realizing that this boy, who had been sleeping under awnings just a week ago, might be sharper than many of her interns. One rainy afternoon, after a rough day at school, Luke vanished into his room and didn't come out for dinner. Caroline knocked gently. No answer. She tried again. I made your favorite tonight, chicken pot pie. The door opened a crack. His eyes were red. I just don't fit anywhere, he said. At school, they ask where I live, who my parents are. When I tell them the truth, they look at me like I'm trash. And here, I keep thinking you'll get tired of us. Caroline stepped inside and knelt so they were eye level. Luke, you're not here because I expect something from you. You're here because you matter. You're not a guest. You're family. Something in his shoulders eased. He didn't speak, but when she left the room, she knew he'd heard her. Over the following months, Caroline began teaching Luke the skills that had built her success. On Saturdays, they sat in her study, reviewing mock contracts and budgets. She taught him how to present himself in a meeting, how to speak with confidence, how to spot an opportunity where others saw only problems. The twins thrived too, Emma with her endless giggles, Ella with her serious, thoughtful eyes. Luke grew fiercely protective of them, but also learned to let them explore without constant hovering. And slowly, the boy who had stood in the rain clutching two crying babies began to stand a little taller himself. One Monday morning, Caroline received a call that would test everything. Mrs. Hayes, this is Mr. Whitman, your board chairman. We need to discuss some urgent matters about the foundation you're planning. Caroline's stomach tightened. She had been quietly working to set up a children's charity in honor of Luke's mother, but she hadn't yet revealed it to the board. They're concerned about funding, she continued. And, well, there's been some pushback about your personal involvement with the children. Some are questioning whether you're letting sentiment cloud judgment. Caroline hung up, feeling a mixture of anger and guilt. She wanted to defend Luke and the twins, but part of her worried. Could she really protect them in the corporate world? That afternoon, she found Luke in the garden, crouched beside Emma and Ella as they dug in the dirt. His face was pale, lips pressed together. Luke, she said softly, something's wrong? He shook his head, then whispered, what if people like me aren't meant for places like this? What if I mess everything up? Caroline crouched beside him, taking his small hands in hers. Do you think I'd let you face anything alone? You've already proven you can handle more than most adults. This is just another storm, and storms pass. Luke looked at her, hesitant, but there was a flicker of hope in his eyes. A week later, Caroline invited Luke to her office. She wanted him to face a small challenge, present his ideas for the Rebecca Foundation to her assistant team. Luke trembled at first, words stumbling over each other. The team leaned back, skeptical, but Caroline leaned in, whispering, just be yourself. Tell them why it matters. Luke took a deep breath. Then he began. He spoke about his mother, his sisters, and the children living on the streets, children like him. He spoke with honesty, his voice growing steadier with every word. By the end, the room was silent. Then applause. One of the senior assistants wiped her eyes. Caroline's chest swelled. She realized that Luke's greatest strength wasn't intelligence or skill. It was his heart. One rainy night, Luke awoke screaming. Caroline rushed in. It's just a dream, she said gently. They're gone, he cried, hugging the twins tightly. Mom, Dad, gone. Caroline held him close. They're not gone from your heart, Luke. And you've got a family here now. Emma, Ella, and me. You're not alone. But she knew the trauma ran deep. Luke's nights were often restless. His fears sometimes spilled into the day. She realized that rescuing him from the rain was only the beginning. He needed time, patience, and love to heal fully. Months passed. Luke continued to grow, confident, sharp, and protective of his sisters. He began speaking at local community centers, telling his story, inspiring other children in need. One evening, Caroline took him aside. "Do you know how proud I am of you?" Luke looked down. "I'm still scared I'll fail." Caroline smiled. "You've already done more than most, and the day you stop trying is the day you fail. Until then, keep going." Luke nodded, a small smile breaking through the shadows of doubt. 2 years had passed since Caroline first stopped her car in the rain. Luke had grown taller, more confident, and every day showed new glimpses of courage. Emma and Ella were thriving, their laughter filling the house. Caroline stood in a modest but elegant hall, preparing for the launch of the Rebecca Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping children living without support. Volunteers bustled around, arranging banners and tables. Luke stood beside her, holding a framed photo of his mother. Caroline watched him carefully, nervous yet poised. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Luke nodded. "I think so. I want to do this right." The hall was filled with community members, local media, and donors. Caroline stepped to the podium first, giving a heartfelt speech about hope, resilience, and the need to help children who had no one. Then she gestured to Luke. His hands shook as he stepped up, but his voice, when it came, was strong. "My name is Luke," he said, eyes sweeping the audience. "I used to live on the street, carrying my baby sisters through rain, through hunger. I thought no one would ever help us. Then I met a woman who didn't just give us food or shelter. She gave us a family. She didn't give birth to me, but she gave me life." There was silence at first, then applause. Some attendees wiped tears. Caroline's own eyes filled as she watched him speak with courage and clarity. After the event, a reporter approached. "Luke, what motivated you to stand up and speak in front of so many people?" Luke paused, thinking. "I wanted to show other kids like me that even if your world seems hopeless, someone can care, and that you can fight for yourself, too." Caroline hugged him tightly. "You've made me prouder than words can say." Years passed. Luke grew into a confident young adult, pursuing his dreams while helping children in need. He studied law to fight for kids like him, inspired by the hardships he endured. One evening, he found Caroline sitting under the stars in her backyard. "Why did you stop that day in the rain?" he asked softly. Caroline smiled, remembering the boy shivering in her headlights. "I don't know. Something about you. I just couldn't drive away." Luke's eyes glistened. "Thank you for not driving away." "Luke," she said gently, "I thank God every day I didn't." Luke's life had transformed, not just because of wealth or comfort, but because of love, patience, and belief. Caroline's small act of kindness had grown into something far bigger, a family, a foundation, and hope for countless children. As Luke worked late in the office of the Rebecca Foundation one evening, he paused to look at a photo of his mother and sisters. He whispered, "We made it, Mom. We made it." And under the same sky where he had once stood drenched in rain, Luke smiled, knowing he had found not just safety, but purpose, courage, and a future worth fighting for.